Hey guys, Thomas the Genie here, aka Mustached, here to review Disney's The Little Mermaid. It's live action remake 2023 edition. If you end up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out small YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal where you can help support me on my channel directly. And fourth to my Discord server where you can join, collab, and chill for free, and shilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let's get into Disney's the live action The Little Mermaid in 2023. But before we get into the story and the plot of it, I suppose I should talk about the lead up to said movie. Obviously, once the trailer had dropped, a large number of notable conservatives freaked out because they changed The Little Mermaid from white to black. And I use the word freaked out because it's irrelevant to the story. The Little Mermaid, spoiler alert, has no context changes based on the color of her skin. That doesn't change anything in terms of the context, again, of this particular story. So the absurdity and the absolute audacity, quite frankly, comes off as kind of just stupid and dumb in this case. I usually like to go by a case-by-case basis of, like, why people would be upset, and this one seems to be on the more dumb side of, like, it doesn't really matter. You just need to get someone who can sing really, really well. That's all that needed to be accomplished, and we'll get into that, quite frankly. So, with that being said, obviously that is not the only context that this has to go under. This is also a remake, which, as far as Disney remakes are concerned, there hasn't been a whole slew of good ones. Perhaps with maybe the only other exception being The Jungle Book, maybe. And maybe Cinderella, I think? I don't know. I don't remember at this point. And all the other ones have been from bad to mediocre or too similar to be, like, distinguishable. Like, which one was it that I saw not too long ago? With the two dogs that fall in love. I forget what it's called. Anyway, besides the point. So, anyways, going into this, obviously there's all this sort of pre-made, pre-assumptioned sort of context going in, and in the trailers it did look a little bit weird in terms of, like, the colorization of, like, what you're actually seeing under the sea, of, like, how dark it is and how people were complaining about that, and the CGI looked a little bit bizarre on top of all that, so things weren't looking particularly well in terms of all that stuff. So yeah. Anyways, let's get into the actual movie and review it as objectively as possible, conceivably as possible, with all that context in mind. And I think that is important for this movie to have all of that context sort of alluded to, because, quite frankly, we'll get into it anyway. The movie starts off with some unnecessary, albeit, text about how, something about mermaids not being able to cry or something that irrelevant. I don't know. It's unnecessary, quite frankly, so I'm not sure why it was there. Anyway, getting past that little fumble at the beginning, the movie begins with a group of sailors on their boat, and they're hunting for a mermaid, not the Little Mermaid. They already know that mermaids exist, and they're hunting one for sport or whatever they're hunting it for. But Eric seems to stop them, and when he approaches, it is a dolphin that pops up in that mermaid's particular place, to sort of like, trick them into thinking like, oh, it's just like something that we're not currently after anyways. Um, and he's going off, and he heads off to the front of the ship, and he gets warned by Grimly, I think that's his name, to to calm down, and uh, you're supposed to be this prince. You're supposed to be behaving like a prince, so you need to set yourself away from the rest of these individuals. They're here to do their job, and you're here to do your job. Is essentially, he's sort of the Sebastian of the human world later on, as we'll come to see, as it were. So, in a weird context, this actually comes a lot closer, this version of The Little Mermaid, a lot closer to Romeo and Juliet, and we'll talk about that in a bit as we sort of progress as well. So not necessarily a bad change, just a different change, because, you can make that work or not work. It's neutral, these sort of types of things, elements you can add or drop to a story. Anyway, so as we start to actually see the ship move forward, we begin to dive into the water, and surprisingly, the first shots underwater are surprisingly vibrant, and I was actually quite surprised because of how dark the poster or the trailers were, to see how vibrant the first shots underwater actually were being portrayed here, at least. I think that's something worth mentioning, since a lot of people were like, oh, this movie looks so dark, and I'm like, no, calm down. It's not that dark, quite frankly. It's fine, and it follows suit of, like, when it's daytime, it's, like, very clear and vibrant, and when it's dark at night, it's dark. Like, that seems to follow, and since we're in a 3-day trial of getting someone to fall in love, which is, the context of the original anyways, with a slight change to it, that being something we'll get to. Anyways, here we see that, again, it is actually quite vibrant. Anyways, we then cut to our introduction to Triton, the father of the various daughters, who, in this version, apparently Triton has gotten around, let's say. He is went to the 7 seas and, let's say, perhaps, slept around a little bit. Okay. That's different. So, yeah. So, in the different seas, obviously, the different 7 seas, as we know them, up above, Triton has, gotten a little bit, gotten around. Then we cut to our first proper introduction to Ariel, who finds the telescope that we see from the ship fall down from where, where it was on the ship, and sort of looking at it through it, sort of observing it, being drawn in by it. Same bewilderment that is carried over, and we are then introduced to Flounder, and we're now being introduced to our CGI characters, being Flounder, and later on Sebastian. Flounder looks admittedly a little bit weird. He looks more like closer to a regular fish rather than a, very colorful, vibrant fish that's very clearly yellow. They colored him down, so I'm going to call it as I see it, just so we're crystal clear. Though, I'm not going to say he necessarily looks bad. I just think he looks like very close to a fish, which not even a very vibrant fish, which I find very odd since there are very vibrant fish in the sea anyway. So that change was a little bit odd to me. It's like, okay, fine. That doesn't. It's not obviously anything against the story. Uh, I also mentioned that the actor, at least, sounds like the original Founder, very close in that regard. So there's that, I guess. Anyway, so since she was already exploring, she continues to do so, and she begins to search this area that are filled with these already sunk ships. And she spots a trident, or a fork, which she assumes is a very small trident at first. And just as like in the original, she is then chased by a shark, and she outwits it by using a mirror eventually to like be on one side, and the shark is looking at the reflection, so it chases towards the reflection, and she sort of just swims away. This is where Sebastian eventually scuttles in, and now we're introduced to him. And again, in terms of CGI, I said initially it looked a little bit odd. It doesn't look, again, that bad. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look bad. It's just sort of there, I guess. So it's like, and again, doesn't affect the story in any significant way, so we don't have to concern ourselves with dropping anything and saying that's bad for the story, per se. Anyways, we'll call Sebastian Seb for short. But we cut now to our final character that is under the sea anyways, and that is Aunt Ursula. This is something that was made more evident in The Little Mermaid, either 2 or 3 in the Disney sequel trilogy that is The Little Mermaid. That is something that they made a thing in the sequels, and yeah, they sort of just carried that here, I guess. A bit of a, I don't know, I mean, since it's in the sequel, I guess it's like, okay, I guess you're setting that up potentially, I guess. So it's like, okay, whatever. Anyways, she's already, like, upset that she's not, not invited to these sort of situations and gatherings. She's an outcast. And she sees that Ariel being sort of wandering, curiosity, she sees that as a potential opening for her to move in and strike, get at Triton, get back at him for apparently, like, banishing her, as they put it in this film. Because she's already done some work in the past, so they're just putting context behind why that banishment is here. That's all that is, really. But as she was, up there, and the opening came from Ariel when she was up there. She had seen the ship, or caught on to the ship that was up above, and caught on to the introduction to Prince Eric. Prince Eric is a prince who sees and cares about exploring the vastness of beyond the little island that they are initially a part of, that they are, in the most literal sense, secluded from the rest of the world. So yes, this is why Ursula is already plotting, is that Ariel saves, as the crew are like celebrating for, I didn't write it down, they're like celebrating for some reason. So they're fireworks, Ariel's like caught on to this, so she's like swims up there, she's observing them and spots Eric and is simply observing him and sort of falling in love at first sight here, which is very clear as she's studying him in particular. The shot is very clear, is like, yeah, she's doing the thing. She's not saying the lines. They're not actually necessary, quite frankly. That's actually one of the beautiful things. I'm actually gonna make a reverse argument of a video I was just in the middle of hearing about. I believe Shad and his two other night crew, and how he was saying like how it was like, oh, this is worse because they don't make a joke about the attraction to the dog, bizarrely, in the original movie, which is like, yeah, but you don't need that dialogue. You really don't. As long as you can capture the visual studying of her studying him, you can understand through visual storytelling that she is curious at the very most, or at the very least, I should say, at the very most, she is indeed, again, as I was suggesting, in love at first sight, gauging in it. And as she continues to observe and hear what he is saying, she's making a deeper connection to the things that he is saying. She is falling in love with his ideas, what he stands for, which is actually something I don't think is in the original, if I remember correctly. So that's actually a bit of an improvement, if anything, from the original source material. I'm actually going to make the reverse argument that I've heard, because, spoiler alerts, I've seen other reviews of this movie after watching it, of course, to see where other people's mindsets were, and I'm going to, again, make the opposite claim that this is actually an improvement from the original source, or the Disney animated version, because it's actually her falling in love based on a deeper connection that we are seeing happen pretty quickly. So yeah, the movie's already doing something pretty good here. We're off to an actually pretty decent start. Let's see, I got lost in my notes here. Just give me a second. So yes, now we see, after Ursula has her moment, we see Ariel now going into her cove. And this is where she does her first musical number. And I am baffled. Utterly baffled. I have heard I've heard the particular chat review saying her singing is worse. And I'm like, you don't know anything about singing. Shut the fuck up about that, first of all. Clearly, she is an amazing singer, first of all. She kills this song. I don't know what they were talking about. This song is performed to perfection. I'm gonna say it. I think it's the best song in this movie by a long shot. That should tell you a lot about the other songs, sure. But I mean, she kills this performance. I can see why she was hired to be the Little Mermaid. She has an amazing singing voice. She clearly has talent. So I am baffled by people's, like, oddities of, like, trying to pick up of, like, why did she does, like, the whole thing with her voice that's, like, it's like, yeah, they're trying to change the song slightly, but it still sounds good, so what's the point about arguing? It's so dumb. It's so baffling. It's so, like, it still sounds good. I don't know why by the way, he's not the only person to point this out. And, like, it still sounds so good. I'm so baffled. You're trying to say that this song sounds worse. It does not. And she does express really, really well. She's a really good Ariel. I'm just gonna say it. She's the highlight of this movie. Very crystal clear. She emotes really well here. And the movement here as well is very akin to the animated version. Absolutely kills it, as I am trying to point out. And I wrote that out of order, by the way. That's why I went back to sort of correct myself. So Sebastian sees this. He eventually scuttles over because he was told to do so. And this is where I wrote about, like, what the crew is doing about... No, wait, no, she does find the crew after her song. Right? I think I have this out of order a little bit. I apologize. I think, like, the I Want More song is just, like, the exploration of, like, I just want to know what their world is, and then, yeah, then, sorry, I got that backwards for some reason. Anyways, yes, because now we get the crew, and I even mentioned they even do a little sea shanty here, which is a song I don't think a lot of people will pick up on, because it's, like, it feels, like, almost ingrained in, like, I don't know, pirate culture almost, is, like, it's the same thing that happened to, Peter Pan and Wendy. I'm like, they didn't even acknowledge the songs that the pirates are singing in this review that I was watching. I'm like, but why? It's, like, these little neat sea shanties. There's just, like, they do a little sea shanty. It's like, oh, that's neat. Anyway. So as I mentioned, yes, now this is happening. Now he's celebrating. Now the fireworks happen. Sorry, I did get that out of order of, like, stuff happening, but I'm not going to restart the recording at this point. So I just want to correct myself and apologize. Oh my god, a critic doing that? Oh my god. So anyways, a storm starts, which is something that happens in the original movie, by the way. And due to this lack of being able to see, the ship crashes into a rock and causes, because they already were sending out fireworks because they were, like, celebrating for, again, whatever reason. This is where Eric goes back to save the dog, and we see the fire catch on, and the fireworks, like, help spread the fire even faster. Ariel helps the dog, which is cool. Helps it swim faster to the others as, it gets, like, tossed into the water by Eric to save him, the dog being. And Ariel just helps it get to the boat faster, and and the people above don't catch on that that's the case. But Eric falls on the opposing side of the ship, in which Ariel does come in to save him. Very, again, akin to the original. So, this is where we are introduced to Scuttle, who was an annoying character in the original, so it makes sense that they wanted to mimic that. So, as far as I'm concerned, they match that energy. Anyway. So Ariel continues her song, but now interludes it with having saved him, wanting to be with him. What would I give to be a part of your world, essentially. But as men come looking, soldiers particularly coming looking for Eric, that is when Ariel sweeps back under the water, and now Ursula has this imagery to elicit, to take advantage of this this innocent sort of puppy love that is across two different planes of walking life and sea life. So Sebastian freaks out and uses the term, and I know that this is criticized, her siren song, which so here's the thing, I don't know the distinct, I don't know if there's a distinction other than sirens are usually categorized as bad and mermaids as typically good in mythos, from my understanding. Otherwise, I don't think that there's any other distinctions between sirens and mermaids, honestly. Which is something that I think that Kraken movie is trying to, like, dismantle that whole idea. So, I don't know. So I think they're trying to use siren in just the more alluring sense. That it's not, it's not in the context of, like, because Eric literally mentions this in the movie. He actually mentions how he doesn't believe in the myth of sirens using that song to lure, saying the myth in the story, luring men to their deaths is what sirens do, or have been known to do in myth anyway. So Sebastian is trying to get her to see that the water life is better. And this is where, of course, his song comes into play, which is, of course, Under the Sea. And, quite frankly, I don't think this song is even that bad. I heard this song was being criticized in multiple circles, and I just thought, they're doing a lot harder than I thought they were going to do, quite frankly, given the circumstances. Is like, they're trying to show various, form to life sea creatures, like, dancing. It's like, they're doing a little bit more here than I think the people are giving it credit for. And again, Sebastian's singing voice is fine here. I don't think it's worse or better. I think it's equal to the voice. So I think the song is fine, even with Ariel singing along. I think the reason this is added here, because Ariel does not sing a part of this song, is that they were trying to elicit that feeling from the Lion King, in the original Lion King, with him wanting to be king, and he's the one who's starting that song, and, exploring what he thinks that change is going to elicit, wanting to be that. I think the reason why Ariel is singing here is to allude to the fact that she doesn't necessarily hate being underwater. It's just that she's curious about what the human life is like. She wants to explore. She doesn't hate her home. She just wants to explore. And I think that's quite reasonable, quite frankly. So she's like, yeah, the sea life is pretty neat, I appreciate what I do have here. I think this is a neat addition. Again, I'm gonna take the opposite approach. I think that's a add-in that adds more value to her character, quite frankly. It's like, yeah, she doesn't hate her home. It's like, yeah, okay. It's like, but she just wants to explore what's out there, the possibilities, but, she's still curious, so she vanishes like a fucking ninja, quite frankly, at the end of the song. So it still elicits the same feeling at the end of the song, so it still carries the same, beat that the original does. So anyways, Eric is now looking for his savior, as he puts it. And we learn a little bit more about Eric in this version, quite frankly, because I'm going to be brutally honest, Eric isn't much of a character in the original movie. So yeah. So we learn again, from Eric from on the ship, that he cares as much as for exploring as she does. They actually share that in common. Again, that is the reason that she is falling in love in that scene, as we see her studying him saying all of this. And now we are seeing that Eric is actually adopted in, and I heard the criticisms that this is added in as some sort of like an unnecessary change. And I thought, like, well, okay, so, I mean, I think it's fine. I don't think it removes anything, again. It, it does technically add something. I mean, being adopted in and being expected to be, to sort of carry this mantle is actually, it does add some. What? I don't understand these criticisms from Shad. I'm sorry to keep harping on that video in particular, but he says, like, it adds nothing, but it's like, no, it technically does. It's not major to the story, it's minor, but it's still relevant. It's like, it's still there, it's still present. It's like, yeah, he's adopted in, but is still expected to be, you know, since the mother is, like, caring for him, and we actually see his mother, by the way. She's actually a character in this. We see that she, like Triton, so now we're getting both parents, at least one of each parent. We're seeing that she is very much wanting to elicit this idea that you must, you know, if you want to be a part of this family, you must be this, you know, you must string along to these sort of rigid expectations as if you were one of our own. I think that does say something about his character. It does. It inherently does. I don't get it. And yes, Eric does get a new song, so we actually get to see that he too also shares this infatuation back with her. That he will explore these uncharted waters to find her, this savior. And, you know, I think that this first new song of the new songs, I think it's actually, again, fine. I don't see any problem with this song. Sorry for the cut there, but we're gonna progress along. As I was just finishing up talking about Eric's new song here, and how I think it's just a reverse reflection about how he's also feeling these, this sort of love at first sight from his perspective type song. Which, again, I think does fit into the movie, which, again, is a bizarre criticism when I heard that it doesn't belong in this movie at all. It's like, no, it's fine. That song is fine. So anyways, then we cut to how the sea creatures thinks that when the shipwrecks are doing their, you know, getting shipwrecked, that is somehow caused by humans instead of nature doing its business. So the mermaids are just as sort of accusatory as the humans are. This is why this scene is added, again, to sort of elicit more closer to a Romeo and Juliet sort of vibe in this iteration. That the mermaids are just as, you know, they're just as confused, as it were, as how humans operate. Anyway. And they do begin to murmur and suggest about how one of the other sisters was very much close to what Ariel is being like now. And Triton is already getting suspicious about overhearing this little talk that they're having. So he calls Sebastian over. And he assumed that, so Triton's able to put together from the little talk is like, okay, maybe Ariel's fallen in love with a mermaid, maybe. Like a merman, as it were. So he's trying to gauge whether or not Sebastian knows this. So he's playing a little bit coy, but a little bit aggressive at the same time in this scene. And the combination of how he words it is very is a little bit, I think, better here, quite frankly, because the performance is a little bit, admittedly, more subdued here. I do think his wording is a bit better here, from what I can remember from the original, as when he puts it in the way of like, oh, you think she's in love or something. That's actually what gets Sebastian to break down, and it's like, oh, geez, she did fall in love, and he let it slips that it is a mermaid. So it does play off Triton a little bit more, being able to ploy in and to use these more interesting tactics, as we see both him and Ursula use later on in the movie. So they do share that in common in a way, other than not looking familial as they suggest they are in this movie. So the next thing we see is Triton already gotten to the cove, Ariel's cove, and is mad and has clearly forbidden her from even moving to certain parts of the sea, let alone the land. So his anger, which is quite present, so I'm baffled by the word flat being thrown around in Shad's video there, because it's not. He's very clearly mad and forbidding her, and destroys all of the objects, including the statue that was being acquiesced, that she sort of dragged there. And we do see he lies. He lies in this review. I'm convinced that he lies in this part. He says that Triton doesn't even do the concerned look back. He does in this movie. He really does. So they might have looked away, or he's lying. It's one or the other. I'm convinced it's one or the other. Just to make this movie look bad. And it's like, no, he does. It's there. It's present. So anyways, we see that Ursula does make contact with Ariel using her two eels that, yes, don't talk in this movie, which I do agree with that criticism, is that having the eels not talk is just bizarre. I think it's the first bizarre, I actually think that is the first bizarre thing in this movie, quite frankly. It's like, okay, that's odd. So anyways, Ursula, convinces her to, Ariel to meet with her in person. So she does. Ariel's swept away by this, offer, and, follows her to her homeland, her, where she was banished homeland, and, Ariel had now assumed that she was a witch, based off of what Triton told her, and she's like, oh, no, I'm not like that anymore. Now, very akin to keeping her, quite frankly, very close to her original counterpart, quite frankly. Even her laugh and her mannerisms are very Ursula, very close to it. So, yeah, again, for the one fault that is actually fair, it's like, oh, well, the movie is right back on track. It's like, wow, that's a phenomenal Ursula performance you're doing right now. So she does her Poor Unfortunate Soul's song, and it's, again, quite as bombastic as it is. She even does a little bit of that jiggle, let's say. She gets a little bit of it. I thought that, I quite frankly thought they weren't even going to suggest that she does her little jiggle, her suggestion jiggle, as it were, but she does it. She puts it in, and casts her spell. So, as she offers this spell, she says that it will take 3 days, and, it must be, suggested that in 3 days you must kiss, and it must be a kiss of true love. So, yes, very akin to the original. And as Ariel leaves, she's like, haha, I've actually made an addendum to the spell to not make her remember that she has to do the thing that I told her to do. And quite frankly, I thought this was another one of Shad's better arguments at first, but then I was like, well, technically, first, hold on. It does make Ursula a better character, because it makes her more conniving, quite frankly. Are you not going to mention that in your review? Oh no, he didn't, so let's mention that in here. It does make her more intimidating and more conniving that she would add this part to her spell. So let's start there and move on, and canonical that and move from now. Now she sings her song, and we see the her voice being taken from her, and so on and so forth. So we do see her have to swim up and make her way. She makes her way up, and eventually gets caught on a ship alongside of Sebastian and Flounder there as well, and Scuttle as well. So the three of them get floundered up a little bit, and Flounder is placed back as Scuttle is sidelined, and then Sebastian is gets to stick around, I guess. And they keep the same sort of joke of Scuttle not noticing how she's clearly a human now. And we get our second new song. This is a thought-based song, which I heard the Shad team criticize, and I heard another review. The other review I caught wind of was the Angry Joe one. And of course I watched both of these after watching the movie, as I just mentioned. So this is an interesting song, as we get to hear what she's thinking. So it's again additional context of okay, so she's being told what these things are, and then she comes to understand, this is what this thing is, got it. And some of the context of what she knows is well, she's clearly visited the human world, or gotten close to it quite a significant number of times, clearly, or have, because her cove wouldn't be her cove if that's not the case. So I do think that the lapse of her knowledge here is actually quite apt, instead of being randomized to what she's going through. Anyway. So, after this little thought song, Sebastian is able to come back and visit Ariel, and he's trying to remind her, hey, you're on this mission, you have 3 days. And Scuttle visits, and she's sort of distracting, But as the two are arguing, Ariel sort of just begins to wander off on her own. And she finds another telescope, this one being bigger and looking to the stars, and Eric spots her. Now remember, she does not know of her mission right now, but the first meeting that they have is just them talking. It's just oh, they're just having a neat little chat. And, of course, she can't speak at this point. And Eric talks about how it's so bizarre how he's been around this castle, and he hears all these people talking with not really much of anything significance to say. It's the way he puts it. And this girl, who's now just washed up, who has nothing to say, is kind of caught his eye. You're just here at this place that's not been visited much, and she's sort of exploring it, seeing all these different things that she's not seen before. And this is where he acknowledges, again, reaffirming that he is indeed a collector too. And she shows off that she knows what some of these things are, because some of them come from the sea, like the horn, like the sea horn, as it were. And the two lean in, because you know, in order to blow the horn, you have to sort of purse your lips. And so Sebastian and Scuttle are like watching them. They're like, ooh. So they're already like, and then they don't do it because like they're blowing into the horn. So this is where we again reinforce the idea that Eric is really cool with exploring these uncharted parts of the world, as much as she was, you know, cool with, again, not hating her home, but wanting to explore what was outside of her home. Again, that thirst for exploring the world is something they actually share in this movie that is not in the original. Something that is added to both of them, that they share together. So this recontextualizes that even though she doesn't remember that this is the mission, that they are supposed to fall in love, she knows now that they at least, again, have this connection. So again, I'm not convinced that this piece of information that she doesn't know her mission is something that's like bad later on, because again, we are recontextualizing her sharing this piece that they have this connection, and that this connection is deeper than just this person is just attractive, which, you know, these actress and actor are very attractive for, I guess, you know, for whatever that is supposed to mean by these standards of like whatever you think attractiveness is. In terms of looks, anyway. I guess. So, yeah. So, you know, as he's like, oh, do you want to, you know, explore, you know, she nods, so she's on board, and he's on board, he's asking her, she's like, so, he's the one, like, sort of like, yeah, you know, see what this girl's all about, you know. So it's like, it's consensual in both ways. I said the word that they criticized, because they're like, oh, this is about non-consensual. It's like, no, they both nodded, they both agreed, in a sense. So they go on a carriage ride, they go on a little date, as it were. So they're on the carriage ride, which is very akin to the original. She's looking around, because she's still very curious. And Sebastian's still trying to follow her. So he catches on to the ride, and Ariel is given the reins to the horse carriage, and she makes it go faster. So she sort of just makes her way into the town. She's like, just, again, exploring. She's just like, ooh, what's this? So she goes, she sees some people, she misuses the fork, which is, you know, she was told it was for your hair. She puts it in her hair. She sees that people are looking at her like, what the hell is she doing? So she puts it down immediately. And then, like, someone offers her, like, a flower, and then she eats it. So she's very still, you know, has this quirky edge to her that's like, the rest of these people are like, what the hell? But she sees the people dancing. Like, she was talking about it in her song, and this is something that's not in the original, so she joins them. And it's like a little, like, non-musical interlude of, like, they're just dancing. It's like, oh, that's neat. So she's actually getting to explore some of the ideas that she wanted to. So that's an add-in, that's a plus to the movie. Oh, wow! Oh, wow! That's something I didn't hear in Shad's review. Huh, that's interesting. I'm sorry if I'm bashing that review, but it is one of the 2 reviews I've seen, so I am going to mention it quite a lot in this review as a rebuttal as to, no, hold on, your criticisms might not hold up as well as you think they do. So anyways, so Sebastian, obviously, he knows the mission needs to be in 3 days. He's, not cursed in that way, and reminds Scuttle that that is the case, and so that he knows that there needs to be a rush. So, Scuttle's on board, so as they're sort of continuing their date, Scuttle steals his hat as they're sort of perusing the town, as it were, and leads them to the boat. The boat. This is where Sebastian gets the idea of, like, okay, we need to covertly convince him to kiss her. So they're, like, singing to him, to sing her. That's the point of the song. Kiss the girl. It's sung to Eric. So the point that they're making here is to make that quite obvious, so I'm not sure why that's being criticized, of, like, why this is creepy. It's like, no, it's a part of the literal name of the song. They're just explaining the point of the song. And yes, this is very akin, and I'm going to mention it again, to The Lion King. I'm going to make that reference again, because this song, as it were, is very akin to a song in The Lion King of Can You Feel the Love Tonight? It's two individuals, in this case 3, and founder Scuttle and Sebastian, being these 3 that know that they are on a mission. In this case, they have these 3 days to get this kiss happen, but they're trying to interfere. They're trying to, heighten the romantic sense, and through their hijinks, through this song, they are actually, while they think they are failing, because, they end, but they fail at the end of the song, so that's where they reach that conclusion, just like how it is a direct parallel to Can You Feel the Love Tonight, because these two, Timon and Pumbaa, in that song are like, well, it's gonna happen, in this case, they're trying to stop that from happening, so it's the inverse. They're trying to stop it, but they're just, again, they're making it worse in their scenario by inherently, because they're falling for each other deeper there, too. So it's the opposite context, but the song is essentially sort of the same context, if that makes any sense. So Ursula gets mad at this, and, I don't think this is in the original. She gets mad because they were so close, so she's visualizing what they're doing, or at least what these two are doing. So she feels as though she needs to take this into her own hands, or, as she puts it, tentacles, to make sure that the day 3 is passed without a kiss. And if she had not done what she does, they probably would have succeeded in getting that kiss on that 3rd day, if anything. Because they were already kind of, at the end of the boat, they were both leaning into the kiss. So, again, I'm, baffled by the criticism, because they both lean in. They were both, into it by the end. The atmosphere in the song was yep, this is just happening now. So they're yeah, might as well go for it, right? We're both here, we're both already interested by that first day with each other, about, we both share this passion about exploring worlds, or our world. So Triton is getting worried. So he's go, other daughters, find Ariel, go far as you need to go to, So, Grimly, asks about, you're looking for this mystery girl, in terms of, because he's been hanging out with, Ariel for the past 2 days and doesn't know that she was that one that was singing to him, obviously, because she can't speak currently. But he's still who was that girl that saved me, though? It wasn't this one, because this one can't sing or speak at all, which is the whole, crux of the main point of the movie. So he's still sort of searching for that, despite the 2nd date. as it were, as to interlude the idea that the meeting in that sort of space in the that empty space in the workshop or whatever room that is, as their sort of incidental first date, as it sort of became, as they're just sort of hanging out with each other. But anyways, this is where we get our third new song. This is the aforementioned and criticized in both reviews that I've seen, the Scuttle rap song. So, yeah, it is the most out there song in the entire movie. This is the one I go, yeah, that makes sense. That does not sound like it fits like anything else in The Little Mermaid. But I'm actually going to have the inverse, again, opinion on it. I think that this is so outside of Disney's typical, typical, like, sort of soar way of types of songs. I actually give them props for challenging the types of songs that they can try. Why not add an attempt at, like, in, like, actually listening to the lyrics? It's like, okay, again, this is very akin to The Lion King. Again, the third time I'm going to make a reference to The Lion King. This is very, in reference to the song, The Morning Report, given by, The Bird, and, I believe the song is cut in one version, of The Lion King. The Morning Report is done by the Bird character. I forget his name off the top of my head for some reason right now, but, point being is that, like, it's sort of supposed to be like that, of, like, updating the situation to Ariel as she's the one who spotted Ursula through this sort of machination of, like, the mirror, like, using a mirror and a reflection as, like, you can see the real Ursula through the reflection. That's interesting. So Scuttle sees that, and so she's trying to warn Ariel. She does it through, again, this rap. And again, I'm going to give the opposite critique of, like, no, hold on. So Scuttle is sort of this annoying character even in the original movie, but he doesn't have a song in the original movie, so they added this rap, which again is completely outside of Disney's wheelhouse typically, so I'm like, you know what? Fair. Like, they challenged, like, what you would typically hear in in a Disney musical. And you know what? I kind of want them to challenge that idea further. Because the last time they did this, they got the song, the catchy song from the Panda movie, Turning Red. They got the whole, like, because they were trying to mimic, in that case, like, a very boy band sort of attitude, but, this is a very custom new song. That's, like, the only song in that movie. But it's supposed to be, like, this very catchy sort of, like, that's, like, the whole point of it, so it very much fits that aesthetic, but it doesn't feel very Disney, like, very traditionally Disney. It's like, yeah, that's very, and one of the, versions of the song, as they're doing it, is a beatbox version. I'm like, that was, like, my favorite part of the movie. It's like, yeah, it's like, okay, so they're trying to do something a little bit different here. It's like, well, it's not, I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's terrible, necessarily. It's just like, okay, they're trying something a little different. It's like, okay, it's okay to me. It's an okay rap, as it were. Considering, like, the alliteration in context of, like, they're trying to update the situation in a rap, that's quite a unique way of doing it, quite frankly, again. So, again, I'm going to challenge the opposite way. I want to see Disney doing more unique songs like this. I want to see Disney push to do a metal song. Why not? Why not challenge this such a rigid idea of, like, these Disney songs always need to, the villain song always needs to be, like, grandiose, but, like, always, like, takes the spotlight. Well, I guess that one's a bit hard to, like, dismantle away from, because that's usually people's favorite songs in most Disney movies anyway. But, like, for the rest of the song, it's like, you usually get these cheerful, upbeat songs, and maybe once in a while you get the I Want More song, which is here, obviously. You get the I Want to Explore More, which is like also in Moana. Moana is also a movie. It's a mixture of like very traditional songs, and you get that one song in there that's like, oh, that was a little bit weird. It's like the the castration song in that movie. It's like, that song is not very traditionally Disney, is it? And I think that song is rather unique. It's an antagonistic song. It's a villain song. It's not, there's multiple antagonists in that movie. So that was a bit of a whole different dynamic in that sense. But, I'm like, you know what? Why not push the boundaries? Why not? Why not? Why are we pushing this idea that Disney must conform to so hard to the original movie if the whole point of a remake and an adaptation like this is like, you're still trying to share enough of it that's like, okay, so that, you're still following enough of it, so you're like, that's still The Little Mermaid, but they're still adding new elements to it to be like, huh, that stands out, though. So I'm gonna say it. I actually think this rap is okay. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's okay. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Scuttle rap. And again, I actually am gonna, again, make the opposite argument. I think that Disney needs to explore that option harder. I think that they need to lean into that more. I think, again, I would love to see Disney try to push for a metal song. I think that would be crazy for them to do. I don't think Disney has the current courage to do it, because I don't think anyone's asking them to do it, which is why I'm going to ask them to do it, if anything. So yeah, bring on the new songs, bring on the different songs, bring on the more diverse songs of, like, you have an entire song in, Encanto that's in Spanish. It's like, do more of that exploration. It's like, these are songs that are like, when you hear those songs again, it's like, those songs are actually catching on to me more and more that in retrospect. Other than the villain song being like the one that really hooks you in. It's like, these other songs do have a place. It's like, but they can also have a unique place, and I want to challenge that by saying, you can do even more. You can break that mold even further from that typical, like, you must format it to be this, this, and this. It's like, you don't have to be that rigid, Disney. You really don't. So I'm actually, again, rather glad that they did this. And again, I say the actual rap, again, quality is okay. So there you go. Obviously they're looking for Ariel. And we get back to this sort of interlude of, like, this mini version of the song, this thought song. It's a shortened, like, expansion of it that sort of connects what has been going on, and, like, how this is changing everything, and how it's sort of circling her back to this point. But, Eric being entranced by the spell, he's like, I'm not sure I even know what I want anymore. This new girl, aka Ursula, has stepped up, and she has the necklace, and she's got this hold over me. She clearly has that voice, the voice of that one that saved me, as it were. So, is that the one I was after? Or was it this girl, or was it this girl that I've been spending the 3 days with that hasn't been able to speak? So he's like, I don't even know what I'm looking for anymore, sort of in this moment. So, they are now trying to interfere with the wedding, because they're like, we gotta get Eric married, much as in the original. He's like, we gotta get married as fast as possible, like, right in the moment, you saved me, let's get married, like, sort of that quick thing. So that's carried very much so from the original. But obviously the others want to make sure that this marriage does not take hold, so Scuttle drops the earring, and indeed Grimly actually also helps by kicking the ring aside so that they have even harder time finding it. So he's like, oh, I'm not sure about this whole new girl situation. He was sort of like spying in and seeing like what Prince Erica, with them in the first date. He's like, he caught them sort of just like hanging out after the fact, after the mom left, and he's like, good for him. He found love on his own. Let me help him by interfering with this new girl that's like just come into the picture. So Ariel comes in. She does a dive from the part of the island to the water to another part of the island to get to the castle faster, by the way, because based on how the island is structured, it's like a U shape, meaning if she goes straight down into the water and up, it actually is faster than going in a U shape. So this criticism of her diving into the water to make it to the other side faster being a bad thing, it's like, no again, Shad, because I know that was one of your criticisms. I heard you say it. So no, that is also wrong. Because the quickest way between 2 points is straight, not a curve. A curve takes a longer time to manage, unless you are moving faster somehow. So yes. So she uses that shortcut. Anyways, so she's back at the castle. So she sees Ursula, using the powers. So Ariel goes to tackle her, and everyone's like, "Oh my god! Like, what is happening here?" So she manages to grab the necklace and snap it here and now, and she's able to let out some verbiage here. So now Erica's like, no, he knows now, like, oh, you were the one actually this whole time, like, oh, and that makes sense, like, and everyone sees it. Everyone sees, like, this blue spiritual energy that is her voice rise up and re-enter into Ariel. So everyone's like, huh? What is going on here? But the sun goes down and Ariel turns back into a mermaid, and everyone's like, oh my god, she's a mermaid this whole time? Yes. As she swims back, being pulled away by Ursula, she loses the dress gown thing that she had on as she was being pulled away. But the eels stop Ariel from being able to escape from Ursula. Again, they don't talk, they're just more of a plot device here. So, again, I do share in that little critique. That is, a fair critique. Fair enough. So, anyways, Triton was told about this from Sebastian, because that's what he was doing during the whole wedding sequence. So he managed to warn him in time, so now he's like trying to get this whole deal sorted out. So he bossed the Trident, and she's able to block it due to this being a deal that they have struck, and this deal is much stronger, so they don't actually need a physical contract to sort of represent it. They just need the shield, really. Quite frankly, it's still a deal. So made in blood, by the way. Like, they show Ariel like bump off one of her scales and then make the pact, which is like earlier on in the movie. Anyway, so Ursula is like, I have I'm willing to make a better deal. If you give me the Triton, I will let her go. So he does so. He hands over the Trident as she held on to it, and now she is the quote-unquote ruler of the sea. And so she turns him into dust, question mark? That one. Sorry for another cut in this review, but it is what it is. Anyways, as I was saying, where was I in my notes? Just give me a second here, because we're near the end. Yes, as Triton is making the deal right. So she has the trident and turns him into dust, as I was suggesting, and or into one of those weird tentacle eye things in the part. I'm not sure which one it is. Either way, so Ariel is technically free due to this new deal. But as the deal is sort of making done now, Eric is underwater and throws his own spear at her, catching her and angering her, and this is where she grows, much like she does in the original movie. Ursula is like aiming to take out Eric, but Ariel bumps her, making her miss. And this is where she takes out the non-character eels, and she's like, no! So, her emotional connection to them is lost here. I will agree with that criticism, again, as I was mentioning, or alluding to. But it's really the only criticism I think of Shad's that holds any weight, quite frankly. I think all of his other points sort of fall flat. Anyway, so she follows, as Eric sort of like, in the water as she's like whirling around, now big. And we have the whole confrontation take place, and as she's like whirling, using the trident and whirling what's under the water, this boat gets swept upwards. And this is where we see that Ariel is the one closer, who just happens to be closer, and she was studying Eric at the beginning of the movie, turning the boat. So she sort of figures it out here, turn the boat towards Ursula. Ursula gets hit by Ariel in this version, which isn't too distinctly different, quite frankly, as long as Ursula is taken out. Quite frankly, I think it's the only part that needs to be maintained here. The fact that they even kept the death at all is like, huh. So, Anyways, so she gets the trident back as Ursula is defeated by the boat. And she grabs the trident and she goes back to her father to give the trident back. And she's like, you saved me. And he's like, well, you saved me too. In return, by, turning me back. Hey there. This is where we see Eric sort of subside back into land and finds the dress, and he's like looking out, and the mother's like, well, your worlds apart, you're not, it's still not meant to be. So Sebastian is called to discuss Ariel in this whole matter. He's like, well, I've done this right, and he's like, so he's agreeing at first, and then he mentions something about Ariel, and then Sebastian's like, well, yeah, you kind of, you're kind of letting your daughter be disappointed because, she's clearly had fallen in love truly with Eric, even despite the memory loss, in this 3 days' time. So, let her be. And he says, kids gotta be free sometimes as they grow up. So Eric and Ariel reunite, and they hug and they kiss. And Triton goes up to her. And he said you shouldn't have had to have given up your voice to be heard. Which is like sort of the through line that he's learned in this process. So she hugs her dad, and she is pushed away. That is the end of 2023's live action The Little Mermaid. So I'm gonna say it. I think this is Disney's best live action remake so far. Which isn't a high bar to settle in the first place, but you know. I think they went above and beyond what I was expecting to see, quite frankly. Yeah, again, some of the CGI is a little bit weird, I guess, if you want to make that lower end criticism. It's like, yeah, but it isn't, it's not like, it is not as bad as, like, Sonic the Hedgehog first trailer bad. It's not that bad. Trust me, it's not that bad. It's not that bad, but it's not great either. It's just like, yeah, it's okay, again, as I was sort of alluding to. Outside of that, when we're talking about writing, and we're talking about, you know, what's in the script, I think a lot of the criticisms I heard, in particular, again, of the two reviews I had seen, one of them being Shad's, and again, that's why I'm mentioning his review a lot more, is that I came along hearing certain things, I was like, no, that's off. You either intentionally didn't see it, or you're not being truthful here. I'm not sure which. I'm not gonna accuse of which one it is. I'm not sure which one it is. But it's one of those two. If I'm gonna say it's one of those two. You're either, again, you didn't catch on to what was happening in the movie at certain points, or you're clearly lying about the movie. It's one of those two. It has to be. I don't think you can convince me it's something else. Anyways, in terms of the script, I think this is true enough to the original to be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Ursula's a little bit more intimidating. Eric has a little bit more character. Ariel has a fantastic singing voice, and I don't get the criticisms that say she can't. It's like, no. You're fooling yourself if you think you can sing better than her, or sing at all, if you're gonna, you know, say that she can't sing, or, you know, trying to point out a particular thing that she does with her voice and saying that that's somehow bad. It's like, no. That's not taking away from the song. It's like shifting the song. Yes, that's true, technically speaking, but it's like adding your own flair to a song is sort of like what I would expect, something that should be praised, not criticized. So I'm baffled by all of these criticisms I've heard so far. I am baffled by them all, except with the exception of the eels. That's like the only one I heard that was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Sure. Outside of that criticism, I think this is a fantastic remake of The Little Mermaid. And again, I think it's the best remake we have of Disney's live-action remake so far. If this had been the first of the remakes, I think that this would have set a completely separate precedent to what we would expect to see of live-action remakes. I think a lot more people, if they were to have seen this one first, if this movie had come out first in the, slew of live-action remakes, I would have the vibe of people would be craving a lot more of these, quite frankly, after what I've seen of this movie, if this was the first one. But because it's in a line, I think that's why people are, like in Shad's case, are trying to find criticisms where there aren't, or, trying to allude to ones that aren't proper criticisms or poor criticisms or which have you, because I think they're just so much more sick of the idea of these bad remakes. It's like, well, now that this good one has come along, it's like, well, now you're trying to lump in this good one with all of these other bad ones. It's like, well, you're not doing anyone a service by either, again, trying to do that by whichever way you're trying to do it, well, again, by not paying enough attention or by lying, whichever one it is. I don't think you're doing enough service to want to push for more of this. This is what Disney should have been doing in the first place, quite frankly. And that's trying to reach as much as to the original while adding context, because all I saw was added context, not missing context or worse context, as Shad suggests in his video. I only saw added context from these little bits and bobs through this version of The Little Mermaid. They are only added to each character or to each little bit outside of the eels. So outside of the eels, I'm going to go ahead and give this movie an 8 out of 10. I think that this movie holds above, far beyond what I was expecting to see based off the trailers, based off of everything I've seen before from Disney. I think that this is the standard at which Disney should have been doing its live-action remakes from the get-go. They should have been coming in from the standard. Quite frankly, I think that this should have been the first of their movies, but then again, I don't know if they would have had the technology back then to so adequately have her swimming and it looking like it's, like, having it look neat or, like, clear that that's what it is that's happening there. I don't know what the case is that would have held this movie back in particular so long, but, I think, like, the smaller CGI stuff is, like, minor. Again, like, making Flounder a little bit more bright in terms of his vibrance is, like, so minor and inconsequential to the actual movie's story and plot that it's, like, I mean, yeah, that you could, it's, like, a minor thing you could improve, sure, but it's, like, that's not going to remove the quality by a significant margin. More rather a very minor one, if anything. I think all the songs, again, for the most part, are either really, really good, to the first song, as I mentioned earlier, to them just being okay in terms of, like, the Scuttle rap being, like, an okay but interesting add-on at the very most. At least I can still find the good in it and say, in good faith, it's like, yeah, but, they're trying something a little bit different here. It's like, that's something out of Disney's wheelhouse, so okay, I want to see a little bit more of that again. I want to challenge that even more so. I want to see Disney push even further outside of that again, as I was suggesting, perhaps a metal song would... I think that's so far out of Disney's traditional wheelhouse that I think that's, like, asking for a main gay character in a Disney movie. That's how challenging I think that it is. It's like, I don't think that's ever going to happen, because Disney hasn't done that yet, in terms of, like, big on-screen presence. So instead of it being, like, this subsided, like, Disney Plus, like, shuffle that off there, something that's, like, big, mainstream, like, made aware of, like, and not telling your audience that that's the case and letting them learn that it is the case, and then they can't critique it for that anymore. It's like, oh, they got, if Disney could do that, I would be quite frankly impressed by Disney. But I suppose for this in terms of live action remakes, I would suppose in this term I would be saying I'm impressed in this reference. In terms of, like, asking, like, this should have just been the quality we should have been seeing from the get-go, because a lot of, again, the critiques are either very minor or don't take away too much from the core movie. Again, the eels not talking is relatively minor, if anything. It's like, yeah, it's a little shame that they don't talk, but it's like, it doesn't remove too much from the movie, I suppose, either. And again, it's like the even more minor of, like, how CGI, not Sebastian, but, like, the other one, Flounder, looks. Anyways, so yeah, this is the best live-action remake by a landslide. I would have liked to have hoped that this, again, could have been the first of them, so that way people wouldn't have that, like, slew of, like, in the back of their heads of, like, oh, there's all these other bad remakes, like, and that sort of bad attitude is already implanted in them mentally, so they're going in with that bad mentality, like they're that's in the offset in their minds already, based off of living context, and that's something that's very hard to get rid of. So again, it's too little, too late in that regard. But I do think like this should have just been the offset. This again is easily Disney's best in terms of live action remakes, of at least of current stature. I will say, yeah, I even say that it's better than the Jungle Book. Dare I say it? Because Jungle Book was seen as the longest time as like, ooh, that one's actually pretty good, all things considered, out of the slew of bad. And then Lady and the Tramp, I don't know why I was like blanking on that title for so long. Lady and the Tramp is like indifferent because it's so like they so don't change anything from the original other than making the dogs CGI dogs in terms of like their emoting and talking that way. Other than that, it's like the biggest shot-for-shot remake. If there's ever an accusatory of a shot-for-shot remake, that is the one. It's like, yeah, it's not better, but it's not worse. Unless, like, again, the only thing I think you could even criticize is, again, how off-putting the CGI is. Which, again, in my line of work, when I'm looking at writing and I'm looking at plot, that has not as much significance to me and my, what I want to see get improved on more so, which is again the writing and the plotting and so on, and the characters and so on and so forth. But all of that has been improved here, so I'm not understanding the criticisms that others have, or the other video, again, as I kept alluding to, has mentioned. So anyways, that is my full review, as objective review, as The Little Mermaid here. Again, apologies for the cuts, but I was interrupted, so I had to cut away and cut back. So, anyways, that is my full review of The Little Mermaid remake in 2023. Who knows what Disney is going to do next, quite frankly, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting one, because it's like, well, now that they have this, it's like, well, can they bounce back? Do they deserve to bounce back? It's like, can they? I don't know. Can they make what people are asking for in terms of, like, new content? More new content, please? Which is something I hear a lot of people also asking for out of Disney. So there's also that. There's a lot of things to sort of pull away from after the fact of The Little Mermaid. So anyways, that is my, again, full review. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me directly. And fourth to my Discord server, where you can join, collab, and chill, and do all that cool stuff. And until next, everyone, bye-bye!